prayer. What is it? I have been in different religious communities and have watched how they relate to prayer. In certain religious communities, the way that they relate to prayer is it is something that is rote. It is something that is memorized. It is something that people have said from that tradition for centuries or even for thousands of years. And what they do is they say the thing they were taught to say, and they call it prayer. And sometimes you take a look at the traditions of the prayers that are memorized and that are repeated, and you go, this isn't necessarily a bad content in the existence of this. But you're worried if someone memorizes it and spits it out as a point of memory, you wonder, is this going to be effective? Has this come from a heartfelt response to God? Or is this something that people were simply told you should say this and that God will honor your saying this? I want to go on record as saying I don't want to really necessarily criticize other people's steps towards getting close to God, but my understanding of prayer is that it is not a point of incantation. It is not a point of a spell. It is not a point of witchcraft. It is not a point where you can get what you want because you said specific words, and those specific words unlock what it is that you want to say. Other people, prayer is a list of, please God, would you do the following? And people have specific things, often that have been on their heart for a long period of time, and when they are seeking to have God respond to their primal heartache, they are in a position where they will end up going to prayer, and they will just start bringing up things that are going terribly wrong. And I don't actually think that, just like the first one, I don't think that that's necessarily wrong either. And I do think that having an attitude towards God where you believe that what you can't fix, He can fix, this is a big deal. And this is a point of faith. This is a point of trust. This is a point of exalting God and recognizing that He is powerful and that we are not. And there's a certain dependency that we have upon God, like a child who is not yet mature would have upon their parents. And I think that God honors this, but I don't think that this is complete prayer either. So it's really fair at this point in the video to go, okay, Rabbi, so you've criticized memorized prayers that you say are done in a rote fashion. You've also criticized prayers that are people bringing their heartfelt needs towards God. If you're such a hotshot, what do you think prayer ought to be? And at that point in time, you smile and say, thought you'd never ask. What I believe prayer truly and really is simple. Prayer is the initiation of relationship. And when you initiate a relationship, you want to initiate a relationship based on truth. And the relationship that you start that is based on truth, essentially, I think that it's not unfair to think of it as conversation. And I think thinking of prayer as conversation between you and God is the start to encountering God. And there's a lot of imagery that's used in Scripture about how God relates to us. God is sometimes compared to a boss. God is sometimes compared to a king. God is sometimes compared to a father. And God is compared to a variety of different types of people. But when Messiah ends up giving us an example of how to pray, his disciples see that the Pharisees of their generation had a form of prayer. He sees, the disciples also see when they talk to Yeshua, that the disciples of Yochanan or John the Baptist or the Immerser, John's disciples had a form of prayer. And they come to Yeshua and said, you need to teach us to pray. And I think that long before they asked Yeshua to teach them to pray, they already saw that he had a fluid, a deep, and an effective prayer life himself that was part of how he was encountering God. And so they said, you got to teach us how to pray. And so when Yeshua teaches his disciples to pray, there's a couple components to this. And the components of Yeshua teaching his disciples to pray comes down to our Father who's in heaven, set apart or holy is how your name should be treated. So at the very beginning of prayer, what Yeshua does is he doesn't give you rote things to repeat, but part of the introduction to the prayer is to recognize who it is that you're talking to. And the recognition is both intimate and close, and it's also distant. Our Father, and you know, when you come and when you have a functional relationship with your dad or with your father, you can approach your dad or your father, and sometimes what you need is advice. Sometimes you need counsel. Sometimes you need help. Sometimes you need a little bit of resource. Sometimes you need other things. But whatever is it within the ability of a father to give his child, the father is, when the relationship is good, rooting for his child to succeed. And so there is, at the very beginning of the prayer, Our Father, there's a recognition of an intimate and a close bond between the person who's praying and God whom they're opening up contact with. But at the same time, there's a balance to this, because it's Our Father who is in heaven. Now, heaven is glorified, heaven is remote, heaven is far off. And so what you're doing is you're saying, one who has an intimate tie to me, but who is also exalted and high and far off, and who rules everything and is above everything and in everything and controls everything. So the start of the prayer, in terms of Yeshua's teaching his disciples, is to approach God with a sense of respect, understanding the intimacy and the closeness of the relationship that Messiah has given us with God the Father, but also understanding the greatness and the majesty of who we're in the presence of. And then the next thing in the prayer is holy or set apart is how your name should be treated. And when you're saying that, you're coming before God, and the very first thing you're doing is saying, God, I'm concerned that you get the respect that you really ought to get. I'm concerned that you end up being someone who ends up really being treated as you ought to be treated. I'm not only concerned, first and foremost, about what's happening with me, but I'm concerned, Lord, for you, that you're going to end up being treated in a fashion that is worthy and appropriate to your station in life. Then the next part of the prayer goes, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. The person who is coming to God, who recognizes God as being intimate and connected to us, but also majestic and amazing and powerful. The person who is concerned about God's reputation here on earth also comes and says, God, you have plan, you have purpose, you have designed things, and we see what's going on here on earth. And honestly, what we're talking about here is, God, what you really want to happen has not yet happened. And we want to make sure that what you want to happen is going to be effective, fruitful, and is going to come together. And so as I'm coming before you, God, I want your reputation to match who you truly are. I want your reputation to be intact. And I also want you to be in a position where your will, your heart, your design, and your plan ends up coming to pass. Because I think that your will, your heart, your design, and your plan is far better than anything that we could have under any other circumstances. For yours is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. There is no limitation, God, on how you should be respected, what your plan and purpose is, what should end up happening or taking place. And only after that introduction and that coming together and that recognizing who God is happens, at that point in time, it comes down to, give us this day our daily provision, and lead us not into temptation, and deliver us from evil. At that point in time, once you have recognized who God is, at that point in time, the relationship comes to a place where it's kind of like, God, these are the things that we kind of need. These are the things that you have the ability to help us with provision. And we know who you are. We're excited about who you are. We're excited about the relationship that you've given us. And we want you to provide for us in a fashion because we're your kids. And because you have the ability to do this. And because you take pleasure in the relationship that we have. So these are just a couple of thoughts in terms of prayer. And I really hope that as you come before God, that if there's pieces of things that you've memorized that are part of how it helps you approach God and enter in, feel free to use them. If there are requests that you need to make because you think that God could work and move in this and you think that his heart is in this, do end up mentioning this. But understand that first and foremost, this is a relationship between someone who is intimate and close and someone who is majestic and powerful. This is not someone to fiddle with. This is not someone who is minimally involved. This is not someone who is on your level. And this is definitely not someone whom you're going to bully or push around and try and get your way out of by being in relationship with him. And as we establish what the proper and appropriate way to approach God is, I think that you're going to find his heart. And as you find his heart, it's going to be irresistible, and he's going to draw you closer and closer, and your relationship with him is going to grow. And one of the ways the relationship grows is the use of prayer. Shalom.